Right, welcome to Policy Matters. This is your boy MongoSlade, and we're going to talk about something that's actually I'm on the fence about, and I think that people are going to find me very amenable to this situation. So, California wants to release 76,000 inmates. 63,000 of those were people convicted of violent crimes. So I'm not going to read this whole article, but this is an article from the Associated Press and NBC News. It says California on Saturday is increasing early release credits for 76,000 inmates, including violent and repeat felons, as it further trims the population of what once was the nation's largest correctional system. More than 63,000 inmates convicted of violent crimes will be eligible for good behavior credits that shorten their sentences by 1/3 instead of the 1/5 that have been in place since 2017. That includes nearly 20,000 inmates who are serving life sentences with the possibility of parole. 20,000 inmates who are serving life sentences with the possibility of parole. More than 10,000 inmates convicted of a second serious but nonviolent offense under the state's three strikes law will be eligible for release after serving half their sentences. That's an increase from the current time served credit of 1/3 of their sentence. The same increased release time will apply to nearly 2,900 nonviolent third strikers, the Corrections Department projected. All right. Also, as of Saturday, all minimum security inmates in work camps, including those in firefighting camps, will be eligible for the same month of earlier release for every month they spend in the camp, regardless of the severity of their crime. So let's talk about what the goal is here, because you have to, before we talk, whenever you talk about policies, you have to talk about the goal of the policy. So what is the goal of the policy? The goal is to increase incentives for the incarcerated population to practice good behavior and follow the rules while serving their time and participate in rehabilitative and educational programs, which will lead to safer prisons. Department spokesman Dana Simus said in a statement. Okay. So I don't need to read this whole thing. I'm just going to talk about it now. Now, I'm on the fence about this because there are two schools of thought. There's the hardcore right wing, tough on crime, which is what you get from the Republicans in this situation. They're saying, absolutely not. This is ridiculous. You should be tough on crime. While the far left and the leftists are saying, well, prisons should be used to rehabilitate, and that look at how our incarceration rate compared to the rest of the world. And, we have X amount of, they try to bury you in data. That's another thing that the leftists try to do, but it's all irrelevant data. Now, here's the reason why the data is irrelevant, because who cares how many people are going to be arrested if those people need to be arrested, right? If they commit a crime for which they should be in prison, I wouldn't give a shit if it's 200 million people in prison. If they deserve to be in prison, then that's fine. They should be in prison. If that meant that there's one motherfucker walking around Wyoming not in jail, then it is what it is. But we also have to look at what kind of crimes people were getting locked up for. This is where we fall back on the tough on crime thing. Because tough on crime created the concept of three strikes laws and mandatory minimum sentences. Mandatory minimum sentences would be something where it would take out of the judge's hands or out of the jury's hands your sentence. So if let's say mandatory minimum of 15 years for armed robbery, that means the moment you get found guilty of armed robbery, you get 15 years, regardless of whether you had, no problems before then or not. I think that was a mistake. See, three strikes laws are perfectly fine in my book, right? Because certain crimes, you shouldn't have to commit them twice, But we also have to take into account, and I think anything that takes, situations that blow things out of proportion and are try to be one size fits all will do a disservice to that case, right? Like an armed robbery, there are 100 different kinds of armed robberies, right? If I say this guy committed armed robbery, what you may be thinking is mask, gun, in the middle of, catching some woman in the middle of the dark with a gun to her head, give me your wallet, give me your purse, right? That guy should get 15, 20 years. But then there are armed robberies where the guy just wants you to believe he's got a gun. So he just creeps up behind you, put his knuckles to the back of your neck. He doesn't really have a gun, right? There's the guys who, and I knew one of these dudes when I was a kid, who tried to rob people with BB guns. It's not a real gun, right? And those are still armed robberies. You know, if he says he has a gun but you don't actually see one, that's an armed robbery. If he leads you to believe that he has a gun, he doesn't really have one, meaning he says, he pats his wallet, but he pats a bulge on the waist of his pants. It could be a roll of socks, you don't know. But the idea is it's an armed robbery because it's making the victim believe that it's an armed robbery. All of those cases should be treated differently, right? Somebody who, violently kicks your back door in and comes into your house waving guns should be different from somebody who just tricked you into giving your stuff up. It's still, I agree, it's still an armed robbery, because, it puts a lot of panic on people. And the reason why they started doing that is because sometimes people will get that fear and it will cause, problems. And, sometimes people will even have a heart attack, especially older people and stuff like that. And they only wanted to hit those guys with like really hard felonies. But you really want to make sure that what a guy is in prison for is something he should be in prison for. The 3 strikes laws were stupid because not only did it account for, and I'm not even one of those people that really fall back into the non-violent drug offenses, because at a certain point, when you're a drug kingpin and you're moving $10,000 worth of weed or coke or something like that, the idea that you just didn't get caught killing somebody didn't mean that people didn't get killed over this stuff. People get killed over drugs all the time. But once you get to a certain level, as far as being a drug dealer, you don't have to touch the drugs anymore, and you don't have to pull a trigger anymore. You tell people to do that stuff. And therefore, I'm perfectly fine with Big Meech being in prison for 40 years or whatever. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure Big Meech probably didn't actually shoot anybody. But how many people do you think that was okay with them killing? And basically, or he gave these guys the idea to kill somebody. He didn't actually have to do it. That's the Charles Manson rule, right? Charles Manson didn't kill anybody, but he put other people up to it. It's the same idea that if you hired a hitman. You don't actually have to pull the gun yourself. You give somebody some money and tell them, hey, shoot my husband. And then he goes and does it. You're just as guilty as the guy who pulled the trigger. And drug kingpins are the same way. They incentivize people to murder other people, either through orders or through saying this guy's a snitch, or, this guy's just in the way. He talks too much, and those kind of things happen. So, quote unquote, nonviolent drug offenses is bullshit, because sometimes a guy just does not get caught with a gun or pulling the trigger, but he did have a substantial hand in the deaths of other people. So I don't buy into that. And I think that that's one of the things that leftists fall very, very heavily into. They say, oh, it's the drug war. It's all these people who getting arrested for nonviolent drug offenses. And it's like, possession, sure. We can argue about possession or even doing. But once you get to a certain level where, you're some upper level management in a drug empire, nah, I don't want to hear that I'm a nonviolent drug offender shit. I don't want to hear that. Right? Because you didn't get there without pushing buttons on people. I'm just sorry. You that's how you gain in the streets. You have people bumped off. You make money, you bump people off. So, that's just kind of how it is. But so I look at things like tough on crime legislation, and I say I understand it because I am a tough on crime person. I am. I just think that you have to be tough on crimes that are actual crimes. I don't believe in being tough on traffic law, right? That's stupid. I don't believe in being tough on drug law. That's stupid. I don't believe in being callous to people who, if you look at the prison population, a lot of those people are individuals with mental health problems and substance abuse problems. I think that sometimes, and this is where, I fall into the rehabilitation aspect of it. Because this is the only rehabilitative aspect the government has, is by separating you from society and then, psychoanalyzing you to death and finding out you have X problem or Y problem or whatever. And sometimes it's X and Y's, both. And the right kind of doesn't care, right? They kind of look at it and be like, well, I don't care what the problem was. We need to start locking people up for doing this. And it's like, I understand that because people still do have um, control over their own behavior, but we also have to take into account that there are things that influences people's behavior. And one of those things is mental illness. Now, when I studied criminal justice, I focus very heavily on mental illness. And one of the things that you find is that a large percentage of the prison population, especially in state prisons, especially in places like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, a lot of those people are individuals who have mental problems, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, substance abuse problems like alcoholism or heroin addiction and stuff like that, right? And while I don't believe the government can fix anybody, so I don't buy into rehabilitation, that the government can make you a better person. I do believe that government intervention in, people who get into repeated fights and stuff like that, and then they get sent to a psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist finds out like, oh yeah, this guy was abused when he was young. He's got bipolar disorder. Maybe if we get him on some medications, it'll change his behavior, it'll change his thought process. Maybe then he can go back out into the world and change his life. I agree with that, right? I fully support the leftists when they create these not drugs, but these diversion programs. Well, how a diversion program works is if you get arrested, then you get if you get arrested for, let's say, getting into a fight, and then they'll look and say whether you have do you have a history of alcoholism, do you have a history of drug abuse, do you have a history of mental illness. If they can find that you have a history of mental illness and you just off your meds, then they'll put you back on your meds. You'll be under state supervision for a short amount of time, and then you can go free. If you don't have a history of mental illness, but then they feel that you might actually have it, you may be in prison long enough for them to diagnose it. And then you will get into the pathway of, hey, get on your medications. If you stay on these medications, you might be okay. And a lot of people are running around here with mental problems and they don't know it. I mean, that's just the God's honest truth. And as much as I hate to give leftists credit, I got to give them credit for that. There are a lot of people out here who have really damaging childhoods and really damaging mental problems, or they have a problem with alcohol and they just have been denying it for a long time. They might be one of those people who like, I have a drink every day, but they really lying. There's multiple drinks per day. Or they drink malt liquor instead of a white liquor or something like that. And that stuff, it does have a different breakdown in your body and has you different behaviors and stuff like that comes from that. So yes, I can agree with that, that sometimes you're going to have a system where we just need to separate this person from their society, get them clean, get them on meds, and then we can send them right back. But then you have a lot of people who commit crimes due to that's just being who they are, like the armed robbers and the rapists and stuff like that. And do you really want those people going back out on the street? I don't see that California is taking the care to look at what these people have done. And I don't believe in flat, except for child molestation. But then you even have to ask questions about child molestation because there are mitigating circumstances in those situations too. For instance, people lying about their age. There have been young girls, and I've known some, who have lied about their age to try to hook up with older guys. And then will try to trap him later and say, well, I'm 16, you're 30. I told you I was 18, but I'm really 16. It's like, oh, come the fuck on. Now, when you think of child molestation or something like that, you're thinking of like a 28-year-old guy, finger banging some 4-year-old girl. That's fucked up. He should get thrown in prison. His balls should get hit with a hammer. But we don't understand that sometimes that takes into account people are lying about their age, right? And we try not to give children that kind of agency, rightly so. But we do have to take into account that stuff happens. Sometimes there are predators, these R. Kelly motherfuckers out here who pick up teenage girls. But sometimes the predatory behavior is the other way. that, some teenage girl, likes some guy. She starts lying about her age and trying to make herself look older and that kind of crap. So we have to take into account that we can't have these tough on crime legislations that take out all the nuance of law and nuance of cases, because things are different each time, and sometimes guys get mixed up in things they have no idea that they're even mixed up in it. For instance, like the laws now that say if you are the getaway driver in a robbery or something like that, you are just as culpable as the robbers. Some guys are the getaway driver, he doesn't even know it. He doesn't, like, sometimes you have these situations where somebody is riding in a stolen car. He didn't know the car was stolen, and he gets arrested for stealing the car, and he didn't have anything to do with the car being stolen. There have been so many stories like that, especially of teenage boys who, their homeboys show up with a car, and he's like, oh shit, it's my grandma's car. He just hop in. A mile down the road, they get pulled over, they find out the car is stolen. And then homeboy is like, oh, I just got in the car like half mile ago. And the cops are like, so what? And then the state is like, so what? You stole the car. He's like, no, I didn't steal the car. I didn't have anything to do with it. Like, we need to be able to factor that kind of stuff in. And so when they start talking about cutting down time for criminals to be released, I think we do need to do that on a case-by-case basis. These large numbers of releasing people due to COVID or due to, well, we just got too many people in prison. That's bullshit. Right? You might have the appropriate number of people in prison. Now, you want to look at individual cases and say, all right, individual cases, we need to start changing some of these behaviors. Or, these guys have been on meds for 5 or 6 years. He was in prison for X, Y, or Z. We think he might be okay now. As long as he knows he needs to take his meds, we're going to let him go. I don't have a problem with that. But like I said, there's the tough on crime legislation that created things like mandatory minimums that separated the punishment and the sentence from the actual crime itself, from the case. That was a mistake. And now you see the leftists are rolling all that shit back. Now they're just saying, basically, we're going to let everybody go. So you're going to have all these armed robbers and gangbangers and shit right back out on the street. And it's going to make their families happy, but all of their victims are going to be like, what the fuck? You just let this guy right back out, and it's just going to create, higher crime rates. And so when they say that the plan is to make safer prisons, the plan should always to have safer streets. That should always be the plan. The plan should always be to have safer streets. Who cares if the prisons are going to be unsafe, because that's where you put all your murderers and your rapists and your child molesters and shit. Of course it's going to be unsafe. You're putting unsafe people in it. Your streets should be what you're focusing on. And then when I see and I read this article and I see that's the goal, is to make safer prisons, I'm saying to myself, what the fuck? Take some of these, and I've seen that some Republicans, and I don't agree with this because I'm against this. I've seen some Republicans say, if you're worried about overcrowding, we probably need to start instituting the death penalty. And while I understand that for certain crimes, I cannot abide by the state executing people, because the state gets shit wrong too much, So no, I'm not going to support the state executing people. What I will support, however, is the state cutting down so many fucking laws. Maybe we shouldn't have so many felonies, But so if somebody's third strike or their 3 strike laws, they didn't pay child support, that's bullshit. Guys, fucking traffic violations, not paying child support, jumping the turnstile on the trains and stuff like that. We need to focus on things where people are actually hurt. Somebody tried to attempt to murder somebody, somebody tried to rob somebody, rape somebody like that. Focus on that shit as people that we put in prison. Traffic violations, not being able to pay speeding tickets, driving with a suspended license, stuff like that. We shouldn't even be putting people in prison for that. Just hit them with a fine. Hit them with a fine. And if they can't pay the fine, guess what? Because one of the things that happens when the people can't pay fines is then they start arresting them. And it's like, and when they do that, a lot of those people can't pay, because they lose their job. So, anything that costs you your job, will create an opportunity for you not to be able to pay the fine. So they should just, go in there and tax it like if you was paying back taxes or back child support. They should just be able to hit you with a deduction. Just like, okay, boom, you got a $500 parking ticket. You can't pay it all. Okay, we'll say you got to pay $10 a month for X amount of months, or $20 a month, for X amount of months until it's paid off. And then, that's kind of how a better way to do this. But, that would require people actually giving a fuck. People don't give a fuck anymore. But I don't support wholesale releasing people for no fucking reason. Because we don't know who those people are. We don't know what their background is. And I'm pretty sure the state doesn't care because they don't live in the neighborhoods where those people are going to be released. So they don't give a shit. But I also don't support, hey, we need to just start locking people up, mandatory minimums, 3 strikes laws, and a bunch of other shit that destroys nuance. We can't do that either. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. This has been Policy Matters. This is for your boy MagMongoSlade. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.